Her true story from Texas. My daughter screamed, "Get out or I'll call the cops." So I left and called my lawyer instead. She thought I was helpless. I had 3 bank accounts she never knew about. It was one of those hot summer days Texas is famous for. The kind where even the birds hide under shade, and the air feels thick like honey. My daughter Sarah was having her monthly barbecue party. Fancy people from her job, her husband Mike's golf friends, and some ladies from her yoga class. I stayed where I always stayed, in the background. In the kitchen, I pulled fresh cornbread from the oven. It was my grandmother's secret recipe, passed down through 4 generations. I cut perfect squares, arranged them on my best plate, and walked them outside with the same careful steps I'd learned as a young wife. The backyard was buzzing with talk. Sarah stood in the middle, holding her fancy drink, laughing way too loud at everything. Her red hair sparkled in the sunlight. I caught Mike's eye when I stepped outside. He smiled quickly, then looked away fast. "Fresh cornbread, everyone," I said quietly, holding up the plate. Some people took a piece to be nice. One lady took a bite and said, That's when Sarah giggled like a child. "Oh, she just hangs around here," she said, pointing at me like I was a stray cat. "Like a pet or something." The laughter that came after wasn't mean, just awkward. But it still hurt like a bee sting. I didn't say one word. I just stood there with that plate, trying not to drop it. I looked down at my shoes. Mike wouldn't look at me. Nobody told her to stop. Nobody said anything nice. I turned around slowly, went back inside, and put the plate on the counter. I spent the rest of the day picking up trash, washing dishes, and staying invisible. Nobody said thank you for cleaning up their mess. When the last person left and Sarah's high heels clicked up the stairs, I was still wiping the kitchen table. Mike walked past me and mumbled, "Thanks, Betty," then disappeared upstairs. Not mom, not mother-in-law. Just Betty. 4 days later, I was alone in the kitchen making my morning coffee. I reached up high for my favorite cup and accidentally knocked over a small jar of honey. It crashed on the floor with a loud bang. "Damn it," I whispered, getting down on my knees to clean the sticky mess. I didn't hear Sarah come downstairs. "What did you break now?" she snapped like an angry dog. "I'm sorry, honey. It was just..." She held up her hand like a stop sign. "You need to learn your place," she said with ice in her voice. "Don't think you have special rights just because you're old." I looked up at her from the floor, honey still on my hands. "Listen carefully," she said slowly. "You think just because you're ancient you deserve to be here? You think cleaning up crumbs makes you special? I didn't mean to." "I swear to God," she hissed like a snake. "If you don't get out of my house, I'll call the police right now." Froze like ice. Sarah had always been rude, but this was different. This was scary. "I'm your mother," I said so softly. "This is my home too. You think that matters?" She laughed coldly, pulling out her phone. "Get out right now, or I'm calling 911. I thought she was pretending until I saw her finger tap the numbers. I heard the ringing sound and watched her put the phone to her ear. "Hello, yes," she said calmly, like ordering pizza. "I need to report someone who won't leave my house." I didn't wait to hear more. I walked past her, through the back door, into the garden where my tomatoes and flowers still grew strong. I stood there barefoot on the hot patio, surrounded by all the plants I had grown with my own hands. This garden was the only place that still felt like home. The soil under my nails, the seeds I planted every spring, the hours I spent watering and caring. And even here, I could hear her voice, cold and certain, talking to someone on the phone. She was really doing it. She was calling the cops on her own mother. Standing there among my vegetables and flowers, I understood something that hit me like lightning. Sarah didn't see me as a mother anymore. Not even as a person. She saw me as trash to be thrown away. And for the first time since my husband Jim died, I didn't feel old and tired. I felt awake. Sharp and clear like morning air. This wasn't my home anymore, but the bank account she didn't know about, that was still mine. And the woman she called worthless. She was about to learn something important. It was the fall of 1987 when Jim and I first saw the little ranch house on Maple Street in a quiet Texas neighborhood. The grass was brown, the fence was broken, and the kitchen looked like it came from the 1960s. But to us it was a palace. We had been married for 18 years by then. 18 years of working double shifts, saving every penny, and dreaming of our own place. We didn't go on fancy vacations. We stayed home and planned our future. That was our way. No waste, just hard work. Jim ran his hand along the front porch that day and smiled like he could see our whole life ahead. "It's got strong bones," he said. "Like us." So we bought it with every dollar we had saved and made it our home. I remember painting the bedroom walls on a Saturday morning. Jim standing on a ladder in his old jeans, humming country music. Sarah, only 4 years old, dancing on newspaper we put down to catch the paint, her pigtails bouncing up and down. "Be careful, princess," Jim warned, smiling big. "Or Mama will paint you instead of the walls." She giggled and spun in circles, getting blue paint on her little nose. We didn't have much money, but we had love. Dinners on the front porch watching sunsets, homemade Halloween costumes, Christmas trees we cut ourselves, a vegetable garden that was more dirt than vegetables but mine all the same. That house watched us become a real family. It saw me cry when Jim lost his job, then dance when he found work fixing air conditioners. It held birthdays, scraped knees, school plays, and sleepless nights. Every memory was built into those walls like cement. When Jim got sick in 2008, we turned the living room into his bedroom because stairs became too hard. I made soup every day and rubbed his back through the long nights. He died peacefully one Tuesday morning, sunlight coming through the window like an angel. I stayed in that house for 6 more years after Jim passed. Every creak, every corner still whispered his name. Sometimes I'd walk by his favorite chair and swear I could hear him humming those old songs. But sadness has a way of making even warm places feel cold and empty. In 2014, Sarah said I should move in with her and Mike. "It'll be good for everyone," she promised. "You won't be lonely anymore, and we have plenty of room." First I said no. The house was mine after all. Small but mine. And it still smelled faintly like Jim's aftershave. But being alone is hard. It makes you hear things that aren't there and miss things that are gone. So I agreed. I packed my whole life into boxes. Wedding pictures, dishes, memories. And gave the house keys to a rental company to make extra money. I moved into Sarah's guest room, thinking I'd be surrounded by family warmth again. First it was nice. Sarah brought me sweet tea. Mike helped me hang my pictures. I thought, maybe this is my second chance at happiness. But slowly things changed. She started moving my stuff around. My sewing basket vanished. My old clock got replaced by a digital one that hurt my eyes. The house began to feel less like ours and more like hers, with me as just a visitor who never left. Then came the rules. No cooking with onions because the smell lingered. No watching TV after 9 p.m. because it was too loud. No having friends over without asking permission first. One evening, she told me sweetly that my flower pots on the deck made everything look cluttered and poor. Put them away. I always did what she asked. But something inside me was starting to crack. There's a special kind of pain that comes from someone you raised, someone you held when they had nightmares and bandaged when they fell off their bike. But I kept trying. I told myself it was temporary, that family meant being patient even when it hurt. What Sarah didn't know, what she never bothered to ask, was that the old house on Maple Street still belonged to me. The deed, the ownership papers, every legal document. Even though I moved out, I never gave it to anyone else. I kept all the papers in a locked box under my bed, hidden behind old letters and photographs. Maybe it was Mother's intuition. Maybe I just knew that some things shouldn't be handed over too easily. And sitting in that small guest room, remembering Jim's smile and Sarah's little girl giggles, I realized something important. I had given enough. When Sarah married Mike, I thought he would be good for her. He was quiet, polite, always said please and thank you. The kind of man who held doors open and remembered birthdays. But what I didn't understand was that Mike's quietness would become a hiding place. Not for me, but for Sarah's meanness. Started with tiny things, as mean things always do. Mom, maybe don't use so much garlic. It makes the whole house smell. Could you not fry chicken? The grease gets everywhere. Can you try to be in your room by 8 p.m.? We like quiet evenings. First, I didn't argue. I didn't want to cause trouble. I washed my dishes twice, kept my shoes by the door, folded my clothes smaller than necessary. Then it became no visitors, no music without headphones, no hanging laundry outside because it looked trashy. They said it made the neighborhood look poor. Slowly, my world shrank to one small room and one job: stay out of sight. I was allowed to cook and clean, but not to live, not to belong. I became what Sarah told her friends at that barbecue. I was just hanging around like a pet that nobody really wanted. She never said thank you anymore. She didn't need to. I swept the driveway every morning. I made their lunches when she worked late. I watered her roses even when she forgot they existed. I was the free maid, the ghost in the hallway. But ghosts hear everything. One night, I came downstairs quietly to get a glass of water. I stopped at the kitchen door when I heard them talking in the living room. She's just always there, Sarah complained. Mike said something too quiet to hear. She's draining us, Sarah continued. Like emotional baggage we can't get rid of. I stood in the dark hallway, holding my empty glass, hands shaking like leaves. The floor was cold under my bare feet, but my face burned hot with shame. Emotional baggage. That's what I had become to my own daughter. Not a mother who had sacrificed everything. Not a widow trying to find peace with the only family she had left. Just old baggage cluttering up their perfect life. I tiptoed back upstairs before they could see me and sat in my room until morning. The water was forgotten. But I didn't confront them. Not then, not ever. That's the thing about silence. It isn't weakness. It's a notebook, and I was writing down everything. Sarah didn't yell very often. She liked the slow drip of cruelty better, like water torture. But one night at dinner she slipped up. We were eating with two of Mike's work friends, businessman types who wore expensive watches and talked about money all the time. The table looked perfect. I had spent all day making pot roast, mashed potatoes and green beans. Everything homemade from scratch. It smelled like Sunday dinner at Grandma's house. Halfway through eating, one of the men said, "This roast is incredible. Who made it? Did you cook this?" Sarah laughed without even thinking. "Oh God, no. That's our live-in maid's specialty." The room went quiet for just a second. Then everyone laughed nervously. I sat there frozen. My face felt hot and cold at the same time. Live-in maid. That's what she called me to strangers while I was sitting right there. In the house that Jim and I had dreamed about, saved for, and built with our bare hands. I excused myself before dessert was served. I didn't cry or slam doors. But I didn't sleep that night either. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing every cruel word she had ever said playing like a broken record in my head. She wasn't the little girl I had raised anymore. The little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and say, "You're my favorite person in the whole world, Mommy." That girl was gone, replaced by someone cold and selfish who had no room for kindness. But she forgot something important. The house she ruled with her fancy furniture and mean words still belonged to me. And the woman she called a live-in maid still held the deed. It happened on a Wednesday morning. One of those peaceful times when the sun came through the blinds just right and the house smelled like the lemon cleaner I used everywhere. I was folding towels, mine, Sarah's, Mike's. I even matched their socks like a good little servant. Sarah walked into the room carrying a manila folder. She sat down across from me and crossed her legs like she was about to make a business deal. "Mom," she started with a fake sweet voice. "I need you to do something for me." I looked up from the laundry pile. "What kind of something?" She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. "Just sign some papers. Nothing big." "What papers?" "It's about the old house," she said casually. "It would just be easier if it was in my name legally. You know, for taxes and insurance and stuff like that. Nothing would change. You'd still live here, of course." Still live here in my own house that I paid for with Jim's life insurance money. I don't think that's necessary, I said calmly, folding a towel very carefully. Sarah's smile got tighter. It's just a signature, Mom. You wouldn't even have to go anywhere. Mrs. Henderson next door can notarize it. I looked her straight in the eyes for the first time in months. No. The word came out stronger than I expected. No, she repeated like she had never heard it before. No, Sarah. That house is mine and Jim's. It's the only thing we ever built together. I'm not signing it away. Her lips pressed together like she had tasted something sour. She stood up fast and left the room without another word. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, my phone rang. It was someone from the bank asking about a loan application on my old house. Confused, I asked them to explain, and that's when I learned something that made my blood run cold. Sarah had tried to get money using my house as collateral. She had filled out forms claiming she owned it, that she had inherited it when I became unable to handle my affairs. The bank worker was suspicious because the signatures didn't match their records, so they called me to check. I asked them to send me copies of everything. My hands shook as I read the papers. There was my daughter's name on documents claiming she was the rightful owner, that she was taking care of her elderly, confused mother. I stared at those papers for a long time, my heart beating fast like a hummingbird's wings. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was stealing. That evening I found Sarah in her perfect kitchen, making herself a protein shake. I stood in the doorway, holding the bank papers. I talked to First National today, I said quietly. I know what you tried to do. She didn't even blink. She kept mixing her shake like nothing happened. You shouldn't worry about things you don't understand, Mom. I understand perfectly, I said, stepping closer. You tried to steal my house. She finally looked at me, leaning against the counter with no shame in her eyes. Look, she said, her voice turning sharp as a knife. You're not getting any younger. You don't work. You don't pay bills. All you do is take up space. I take care of this house, I said. I cook, clean. You exist, she interrupted like swatting a fly. Like wallpaper that nobody wants to look at. Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. But I stood my ground. And still, I said quietly, my name is on the deed. Her face twisted with anger. For a second I saw something ugly flash in her eyes. Panic, rage, greed all mixed together. Then she laughed, but it sounded hollow and fake. You think that piece of paper means anything, she sneered. You think that matters now? It means everything, I said. You don't own this house, Mom, she spat like poison. Not really. You live here because I let you. Because I felt sorry for you after Dad died and thought maybe family should stick together. But let's be honest. Nobody keeps you here out of love. Each word felt like a slap across my face. She wasn't done. And if you won't cooperate, she said, stepping closer like a bully, then maybe you shouldn't be here at all. What does that mean? I asked, though I already knew. It means, she said slowly, you have 48 hours to leave. Or I will call the police and tell them you're trespassing in my house. That was the moment I realized my daughter didn't just want me gone. She wanted everything. She wanted the house, the money, the freedom to erase me like I had never existed. She thought my silence meant surrender. But she forgot something important. I wasn't the one trespassing. I was the one who owned the ground she was standing on. It was 2:30 in the morning when I got out of bed without making a sound. I moved like a ghost through my own routine. After all, I had been planning this moment in my head for weeks. The house was dead quiet. Mike was snoring upstairs. Sarah was probably scrolling her phone under the covers like she did every night. I didn't care what either of them was doing anymore. I opened my closet and pulled out the old suitcase I hadn't used since moving here. Inside, I packed just what mattered. Clean clothes, my worn leather purse, Jim's wedding ring that I kept in a little box, his death certificate, our marriage license from 1969, and most important of all, the deed to the house with my name on it in black ink. My fingers brushed against the silver frame on my nightstand. Jim in his wedding suit, grinning like he had won the lottery. And me in that white dress Mama helped me sew by hand. I wrapped it in a soft towel and tucked it safely in the suitcase. Then I sat at the little desk and wrote a note. It wasn't long because I didn't have much left to say. Sarah, I don't hate you, but I'm done begging for space in a house I bought with my husband's life insurance money. I have nothing left to give you and nothing left to ask from you. I folded the paper and left it under the ceramic cookie jar she never used on the counter. Then I put on my shoes, picked up my suitcase, and walked out the front door for the last time. The morning air was cool and smelled like jasmine from Mrs. Garcia's yard next door. As I walked down the sidewalk, my suitcase wheels rolling softly on the concrete, I didn't look back once. Not even a glance. I checked into a small motel near the highway. Clean, simple, the kind of place where nobody asks questions as long as you pay cash up front. I sat on the edge of the bed for a minute, looking at the plastic cups by the sink and the TV with no sound. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the business card I had been saving. Robert Martinez, attorney at law. Jim's oldest friend since they were teenagers. He had been at our wedding, holding Jim's ring while I walked down the aisle. He had been there when Jim got cancer. He had been there when Jim died. And thank God he was still alive and practicing law. I dialed his number with steady fingers. Betty, he said, his voice sleepy but concerned. Everything all right? I need to see you, I said simply. Today if possible. He didn't ask why or what happened. He just said, 9 a.m. My office. I barely slept, but not from worry. From the strangest feeling of peace I had felt in years. Like I had finally stopped carrying a heavy bag I didn't know I was holding. At 8:45 a.m., I knocked on Robert's office door. He worked out of a small building downtown, surrounded by law books and pictures of his grandchildren. He opened the door wearing a sweater and glasses, looking exactly like the reliable man Jim had always trusted. Come in, Betty, he said gently. You look determined. I laughed for the first time in months. We sat at his big wooden desk while I spread out all my papers. The deed, the original purchase documents from 1987, 30 years of property tax bills. All in my name. She tried to steal it, Robert said quietly, looking through everything. But she can't. Legally, she doesn't have a prayer, Betty. This house is yours, every brick and board. I want to sell it, I said clearly. As fast as possible. He raised his eyebrows but didn't question my decision. He just nodded slowly. I'll handle the legal protection. You'll need a good realtor. I already have someone in mind. I left Robert's office and walked 3 blocks to a bright little real estate office with a blue awning that said, Martinez Family Realty. No relation to Robert, just good Texas luck. Maria Martinez was in her 40s, energetic, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She was the sister of a woman I used to work with at the library, and I remembered her coming in as a teenager to use the computers for school projects. I told her exactly what I needed. I want it listed this week. No delays, no big open houses. Just show it quietly to people who are serious about buying. Maria nodded like she understood completely. I'll take care of everything personally, Mrs. Collins. That afternoon we met at the house. My house. I waited in Maria's car while she walked around taking pictures and measuring rooms. I couldn't bear to go inside. Not anymore. It would just make me sad for what used to be happy there. When she came back, she handed me a clipboard with papers to sign. The market is really good right now, she said with a smile. You should get multiple offers if we price it right. But first, she held out a pen. You need to authorize me to sell it. I took that pen and my hand was steady as a rock. I thought maybe I would hesitate, that I'd feel sad or scared. But I didn't. My signature was clear and strong. The sound of that pen moving across the paper was the quietest revolution I had ever started. And it was the loudest thing I had ever said to my daughter. That night I didn't cry or worry. I got a room in a nicer hotel closer to downtown and fell asleep with the window open, letting the sounds of the city remind me that I was free. I was no longer living under anyone's rules but my own. Maria worked faster than lightning. At exactly 7:30 a.m., her listing went live on the internet. 4 beautiful photos, a detailed description of the house's charm and location. No mention of who was living there currently. Just charming 3-bedroom ranch home with mature landscaping and original hardwood floors. Owner since 1987. By 9 a.m., her phone was ringing non-stop. By lunch, she had shown the house virtually to 3 different buyers. One family relocating from California, one young couple buying their first home, and one retired teacher named Patricia who had just sold her bigger house after her husband passed away. By 3 p.m. there were 3 offers on my desk, all at full asking price or higher. The first was from the California family who wanted to move fast. The second was from the young couple who wrote a sweet letter about starting their life together. The third was from Patricia, who offered cash and said she wanted to plant a vegetable garden in the backyard. I chose Patricia not just because of the money, though her offer was the cleanest, but because she reminded me of myself 30 years ago, a woman starting over looking for a place to call home. Maria sent me the contract on my phone. I read every word carefully, my reading glasses perched on my nose, my hands completely calm. I signed my name with confidence. It was done. By sunset, the house was no longer mine, but it also was no longer hers. I sat in my hotel room watching the Texas sky turn orange and pink, the sun disappearing behind the downtown buildings like a coin dropped in a fountain. My phone started buzzing beside me on the bed. Sarah's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. The calls kept coming every 15 minutes. By the time I had brushed my teeth and put on my pajamas, she had called 12 times. No voicemails, no text messages. She didn't want to explain or apologize. She just wanted control. I turned the phone off and placed it in the drawer next to the hotel Bible. The next morning, Sarah's perfect world came crashing down. At 8 a.m. sharp, a courier knocked on her door with a certified envelope. Inside was the legal transfer of ownership, signed, sealed, and absolutely final. The property now belonged to Patricia Williams. Effective immediately. Also in the envelope was a formal eviction notice. 7 days to pack up and leave, or the new owner could take them to court and have them removed by force. The envelope had my name in the return address. Not Mom, not Mother. Just Betty Collins. I imagine Sarah stood in her perfect kitchen for a long time, reading those papers over and over, looking for some mistake, some way to undo what I had done. But there wasn't one. What she never understood, not even once, was that I never needed to scream or throw things. I only needed to remember what belonged to me and use it. By noon, Maria texted me to say she had gotten an angry voicemail. Sarah had called, pretending to be the real homeowner, trying to stop the sale. Maria simply replied, "All paperwork is verified and filed with the county. Mrs. Collins was the legal owner and had every right to sell. This matter is closed." Then Sarah called me 15 times in 2 hours. She left exactly one voicemail, and her voice was shaking with panic and rage. "Mom, what have you done? You can't sell that house. We live there. Have you lost your mind completely? Call me back right now. This isn't a game." That word again, we. She never said you built this or you lived there first or I'm sorry for being cruel. In her mind we lived there and now we were being kicked out. But there was no we. There was just her learning that actions have consequences. By dinner time my phone had rung 31 times. I didn't answer once. I sat by the hotel window watching traffic move like rivers of light through the streets below. I made myself a cup of tea from the little packets by the coffee maker. Not as good as my own kitchen, but it would do. Sarah didn't leave another voicemail. She knew by then that I wasn't bluffing and I wasn't coming to rescue her. It didn't take long for the neighbors to start talking. By Thursday, the whispers began spreading like wildfire. Cars slowed down when they passed the house. People watered their gardens a little longer just to get a better look. By Saturday, the gossip had a rhythm all its own. She's getting evicted. No, she's being foreclosed on. Can you believe it? Her own mother sold the house without telling her. I thought that place belonged to the family. And the cruelest one of all, the one that followed Sarah everywhere she went. Imagine getting thrown out by your own mother. What did she do to deserve that? Sarah heard every whisper. She stepped outside that morning wearing dark sunglasses and bright red lipstick. Her chin held high like a queen. But the dark circles under her eyes and the way her hands shook when she lit her cigarette told the real story. She packed slowly, hoping someone would come save her. Hoping I would appear with a change of heart. Hoping some miracle would undo the very thing she had dared me to do for months. But miracles don't come to people who call their mothers worthless. Just silence and a U-Haul truck she had to pay for with her own credit card. When she finally carried her expensive suitcases down the front steps, 2 matching pieces that probably cost more than Jim's last paycheck, she clutched her phone like it was a lifeline. It buzzed constantly with spam calls and work emails, but never with the call she was desperately waiting for. She tried calling me over and over. I didn't pick up, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I had already said everything that needed saying. She had never really listened to me before. She only talked at me, never with me. Now my silence was the clearest message I could send. Mike didn't help her carry a single bag to the truck. He stood by his car with his arms crossed, looking like a man who had finally seen enough. When she tried to hand him one of her heavy bags, he stepped backward. "I'm going to stay with my brother in Dallas," he said flatly. "This is too much, Sarah." "Mike, wait." She started, but he was already shaking his head. "I can't do this anymore," he said simply. Then he got in his car and drove away, leaving her standing alone in the driveway with her suitcases and her phone. That night around 8 p.m., I heard someone pressing the buzzer at my new apartment building. I had just made myself a cup of chamomile tea and was watching the city lights twinkle like earthbound stars through my window. My new home smelled like fresh paint and freedom, the kind of freedom I hadn't felt in years. I checked the security camera screen. There was Sarah, her makeup smeared, her hair messy from the wind. She wasn't wearing sunglasses this time. Her eyes were red and puffy like she had been crying for hours. She pressed the buzzer again, then looked up at the camera. Her lips were trembling. Finally, she spoke into the intercom. "Mom, please. Sorry. I made a terrible mistake." I didn't move from my chair. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. "Just let me come up for a few minutes. I have nowhere else to go." The intercom went quiet. She pressed her hands together like she used to do when she was 5 years old, praying for a new doll for Christmas. Like that innocent gesture could erase years of cruelty. "Please, Mom," she said again, her voice so small I almost didn't hear it. "I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you. Just give me one more chance." I watched her for a long moment, remembering the little girl who used to climb into my lap when she was scared. Then I stood up slowly, walked to the window, and closed the curtain. I didn't do it with anger or hatred, just with the calm certainty that comes from finally learning a lesson you never wanted to learn. Sometimes the people you love most in this world will cross a line so deep, so final, that there's no way back. And sometimes, for your own peace and dignity, you have to let them stay on the other side. My new apartment was on the 18th floor, high above the busy streets of downtown Dallas. From my living room window, I could see the whole city spread out like a blanket of lights. Cars moved like fireflies through the darkness. Buildings stood tall and proud against the night sky. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Completely paid for with the money from selling the house Jim and I had built together. The first thing I did was set up a small herb garden on the tiny balcony. Just basil and mint mostly. Jim had always loved the smell of fresh herbs. I'd pick a few leaves some mornings and crush them between my fingers, letting the scent drift over my morning coffee. Peaceful and quiet in the best possible way. Not the scary silence of loneliness, but the gentle quiet of contentment. One evening, I made myself a cup of mint tea, wrapped my favorite shawl around my shoulders, and stood at the big window watching the sun set behind the skyscrapers. The sky turned all shades of purple and gold. That's when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Sarah's name appeared on the screen again. I watched it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I picked it up and turned it completely off. 10 minutes later, the building intercom buzzed downstairs. I looked at the security monitor. She was back, standing under the streetlight with a small backpack, looking lost and desperate. Her coat was too thin for the cool evening air. Her hair hung limp around her face. She looked up at the camera and I could see the hope flickering in her tired eyes. "Mom," she said into the speaker, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're angry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm your daughter. Please don't leave me out here in the cold." I stepped out onto my balcony 18 floors above her. She looked up and saw me, her face lighting up like sunrise. The kind of desperate hope that breaks your heart even when you know you can't fix it. I said nothing for a long while, just looked down at the woman who used to be my little girl. Then, with the same calm voice she had once mistaken for weakness, I spoke clearly into the night air. "Sarah, you taught me that blood doesn't make you family. Love and respect do. You forgot both a long time ago." Her face crumpled like paper. She nodded once, slowly, as if she finally understood what she had lost. I watched her pick up her backpack and walk away into the night, her footsteps echoing off the empty sidewalk. I didn't watch her disappear around the corner. I didn't need to. I had already said goodbye a long time ago. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you gave birth to, if you've ever been made to feel worthless in a house you paid for with your own sweat and tears, if you've ever cooked the meals and washed the clothes and tended the garden only to be called a burden, then maybe you'll understand what I mean when I say this. Kindness is not weakness, but it has limits. I used to think being a mother meant accepting any treatment, forgiving any cruelty, because that's what mothers do. When Sarah first rolled her eyes at me, I stayed quiet. When she made rules for my life like I was a child, I obeyed. When she laughed at me in front of strangers like I was entertainment, I smiled and pretended it didn't cut deep. Because I am her mother. And mothers endure until the day we decide we don't have to anymore. You see, it's easy to love your child when they're small, when their mistakes are innocent, when their worst crime is spilling juice on the carpet. But what happens when that child grows up and decides your life doesn't matter? What happens when the baby you rock to sleep turns around and says, "You're just a burden. Get out or I'll call the cops on you"? What happens then? Here's what I did. Got quiet. Got calm. And I remembered exactly who I was before she forgot. Called my lawyer. Called my realtor. And I sold that house right out from under her cruel feet. Not because I'm vengeful, but because I finally remembered my worth. Now I sit by the window of this downtown apartment I bought with my own money. Mint and basil grow in little pots on my balcony. The city hums its evening song below me, and I hum right back. The phone doesn't ring anymore. Sometimes it's Sarah trying one more time. Sometimes it's just silence. But I don't answer because I'm not the woman who begged for kindness from someone who had none to give. I'm the woman who remembered what she deserved and went out and got it. And if you've stayed quiet too long, if you've swallowed disrespect because you thought it would keep the peace, if your grown child or anyone else has ever made you feel like you don't matter, then let me be the voice you never found. Subscribe to Granny Twisted Tales because here, revenge doesn't need to shout. Just needs to remember its own power. Here we don't scream, we act. We plan. We remember so clearly that the world has no choice but to pay attention. Because in this place, silence isn't surrender. Strategy. And strategy, well, she wears comfortable shoes and drinks her tea slowly, savoring every single sip.